Sometimes you find yourself in a bit of a situation where you can't go under it, you can't really go over it, so you gotta go through it.
Breaking feedback, unless I'm gonna.
This is the final sketch for the Whittier series, and this is a really fun one because we're going to be sketching the tunnel today. Now, the other 4 so far, they kind of all line up a little bit like this. We've got Portage Pass, we've got that big building, and then, of course, we have this that's going way off the edge. But it's kind of fun to have it all compressed into one. When it comes to the actual panorama, a little bit more spread out, but just trying to capture as much of it as I can right here. And this is a really big part of Whittier right now. As we learned with Portage, that used to be kind of your only way to get over and around, but this made a big change. So let's fill this out, and if you want, this is just the basic sketch. If you want, you can add some little cars or something going through. You could make it from the 1960s if you wanted, or modern day, or maybe you have a boat or something like that. You can't bike through the tunnel, but you could still put a bike if you wanted. And you could even extend this little bush here too if you really wanted to fit in with the rest. But I'm just gonna add a little car right here. I'm not too good at drawing cars, so mine is gonna be kind of a little square Studebakery kind of thing. A couple wheels in here. Ooh. There we go. It kind of looks like a truck almost. Yeah, we'll go with that. This will be a truck now. There we go. Perfect. The real trick is if you're not super good at drawing cars, just draw them really tiny. Put like a little VW bug or something in this one. There we go. You'll see, it is amazing how sometimes just a little tiny subject can make a huge difference in your sketch, but it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. The train also goes through here too if you prefer to draw a train, but I'll just draw a couple little cars right here, just spaced a little bit apart, and then let's jump right in. Okay, so we're gonna be painting this just kind of a little cross section, which is what's so fun and kind of cool. Actually, now that I have the pen out, I'm thinking about it. If you want, you can even add like a little bit of the, the edge or something like that. There we go, there's the edge of our mountain. And this section, just crosshatch a bit in there. This section is the top of the tunnel. Sometimes I like to add a little bit of texture because it's going to be covered up and you won't be able to tell, but it gives a little bit of context for where I am. There we go. So this is kind of the tunnel going straight through this mountain. Okay, let's start with the sky, kind of like how we have with the rest. That's just going to be a little bit of water down below, a little bit of blue up top. Always kind of fight the smallest guy, is what I've understood for skiing and hiking and tasks and all of that. So this is going to be the easiest way to do it. And then touch of some cerulean blue right up to the top, because Whittier is always sunny. No, the expression is it's always prettier in Whittier, which might be a little bit fun making, but then there's another version that has an S in there. That's also what is said. But we got a little bit of sun because it is a beautiful sunny day in these sketches. Although Whittier in the rain is still amazing. And then maybe I'll even add a touch more water down here. Just let it all mix in. And in just a minute or two, this will be dry. That's what we kind of do at first. And you'll notice I put these together because I kind of want them to line up a little bit. And no matter what yours looks like, if you did this one, you can just kind of make the values loosely the same and it'll look like it all fits in perfectly. To be honest, there's about maybe half a mile between these two, and maybe half a mile between these two. But it's just kind of fun with watercolors. You just need just a touch, just to kind of connect it, and then you can make it as long as you want, which is so fun. Okay, kind of painting how it feels, not always how it is. So I got a really fun one right here. This is going to be a big green mountain. This one right here is going to have a little bit of blue in it. But while we're down here, let's paint the road and let's paint this top right here and maybe even into the tunnel a little bit. Now the tunnel itself is pretty well lit. There's these cool lights kind of going throughout all of it, but there's also these little tiny emergency hatches, which if you want, we could also make one of those right here, but they kind of go into the side in case there's like a cave in or something wild like that. But it's just hard to wrap your head around being under so much rock. I'm going to start by just painting in a little bit of this tunnel right here because we want it to dry. And how I'm going to do that is I'll probably just put a light wash of something kind of warm, almost like the color of those lights, and then probably just a little bit of darkness on the top, and then we'll paint right over top. So this is what that would look like. Just a touch of some red, maybe a bit in that yellow. I'm just going to add a little bit of this nice warm light in the tunnel, just to give it some, there we go, perfect. And then I might just add a touch of brown or something, just while it's still wet, right to the top to give it some kind of shading. Maybe even a bit of purple if I'm feeling brave and a little spicy. There we go. Perfect. And that just kind of shows that it is kind of a rounded thing, because the wild thing as it is, it's just a big circle drilled right out of the mountain. And then maybe I'll even add just a touch there to the road, which we'll probably fill in later, but it's just kind of a good layer. I like how that purple looked. I'm just going to try a little bit more of that. Just a touch right here. Now, what's so fun with watercolor is you don't have to paint it like a photograph. There's nothing wrong with, working off of a photograph or a memory or a sketch. But what's so fun is you can literally paint anything, anything you can imagine. The problem is it can be kind of tough to get into that mindset a little bit, but these are kind of fun ways to start it, just imagining this cross section through this mountain. Okay, now, well, I've got a little bit, I might just add a touch in here as well, but mostly this one is going to be pretty dark. Wonderful. Okay, and now I might just add a little bit of some brown right up top, maybe a bit of green to kind of show the edge of this mountain right here. And when you're deciding to kind of drill through this mountain, a lot of it was around the defense of Alaska, which was actually invaded by Japan during World War II, but it was kind of a secret. Japan was pretty open and out with it, but they didn't want people in America to freak out, so it was kind of a hidden war. But they did all of these big projects, like drilling an enormous tunnel through this mountain, because they wanted to be able to get people from Whittier to Anchorage, because they were worried Anchorage was going to be invaded. Normally, you would just kind of go over the pass here, but it turned Whittier into this really big deal. Okay, got a little bit of that green right there. And with all of this, we're kind of just, it's a matter of timing really, so we're kind of just waiting for that to dry just a little bit until we can get the rest. While we're at it, maybe we touch it on this road right here. Maybe a little bit of kind of road color, which if you mix brown with kind of a light blue, it gives you kind of a nice gray. Look at this. Brown plus light blue, bam. Kind of a nice gray road. Maybe a bit more blue in that. There it is. That is looking perfect. Lovely. There we go. Road's kind of being hidden by our little bush here, which I extended out a little bit, but it does all kind of connect, Now next we might be able to work on this if it's dry. Yeah, this is looking pretty dry. So maybe we work up on this section right now. With these colors, I'm kind of just aiming for the same tone. It doesn't really matter if it's like exactly the same. If you have a blotch of purple here, just make sure there's a touch of a blotch of purple there. That's really all you need to kind of connect these. Just like a tunnel from one side of a mountain to another. Ultimately, if they connect, it's good. That's impressive on its own. So I'm gonna touch just a little bit of this yellow. Looks like I was kind of doing some yellow on this one, and I want to mix that into a little bit of green, and then I'll probably get some browns and some purples in there as well. These mountains really have all of it. If you're in Alaska in the summer, just kind of look up. Sometimes it's just like a wall of green, but when you start to pick out the colors, it's just this really special. It's like this really special color because it's made out of all of these flavors. It's like a perfume, It's not just one scent; it's all of them together. And I feel like that's what I love about sort of painting in Alaska is there's just these really familiar colors that are unlike anywhere else. A little bit of brown here going in. Just around there. It's not too wild. It's not like, a giant birch forest in the fall where it's all yellow, or one of those really red falls in the Adirondacks. But it's still got its own magic. And just a touch of blue right down here. just right to the edge. And that should be enough to kind of connect those two. I'm also going to add just kind of a strip of blue up top. This is something I like to do sometimes, is I'll add just a touch of blue to the top of whatever kind of ridge I have while it's still wet. It gives me a nice kind of clean edge up top, and then it kind of drips down, which is kind of a cool look. There we go, something kind of like that. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's a back mountain anyway, but a good start. Oh, what the heck, maybe just a tiny bit more purple and a bit more blue. Something just a little bit like that. There we go. Okay, leaving that alone. So we've got all of that just doing its thing. And now let's see what's dry here. That doesn't feel too dry. That's still a little wet. So we're gonna hold off on this mountain, and we kind of need this one to dry. So if it's dry, just before, if you want, maybe just a little strip of green, this grass down here, which kind of is going to break a little bit of, you know, some rules of art here, because I guess we're taking grass into a cross section, but that's okay. You could also make the mountain continue here if you want, but I'm just going to add a little bit of grass right there just to make it simple. Lovely. Maybe I'll recycle a little bit of blue or something in there just to make it a bit more complex. There we go. Now, while we let this dry just for a second, and maybe I'll even add just a touch of water here just to let it kind of flow up. That's something I like to do while it's still kind of wet. Gives me some nice blooms. While we're waiting for this to dry just a second, let me take you inside this tunnel because it's kind of a wild story. Now, tunnels aren't that wild these days, but a 2.5-mile one, especially in Alaska, is something a little bit different, considering Alaska at the time had so little road. This tunnel's built in the early 1940s, which kind of just gives you a sense of how important it was for them to be able to get from one place to another. And it seems like a lot of work, drilling a massive hole through a huge mountain, but try going up literally any of these mountains in Alaska, especially during winter, with any amount of weight on your back, and you realize just how crucial it is to be able to move in these areas. I mean, the KMTA transportation corridor, like the whole idea is it consolidated animals, people, history. It's all just layered on top of each other, and so if you want to break out and do anything different, you literally have to move mountains, which is what they did in this case. Once it was finished, it was used primarily with trains. Well, almost exclusively with train. This tunnel was big, but you couldn't get 2 trains in it. And they'd bring goods to and from Whittier, which was one of those deep water ports that could actually, harbor a really big full boat. Only in the 2000s, 1998 and then 2000 in particular, was it retrofitted to be able to handle cars. And that's when traffic began to travel to and from on the half-hour increments. Like I said, the tunnel's big, but it's not wide. Or at least not wide enough for 2 cars to pass each other. So to fix this problem, cars are able to go to Whittier on the half hour and away from Whittier on the hour. It's just one direction. So if you miss the tunnel or the cutoff, you could be stuck waiting for a little while. And then trains kind of go through every once in a while as well. It might not seem like the wildest thing in Alaska, and just par for the course on what is a wild transportation corridor. But next time you're heading through the tunnel, just imagine what it would be like to hike up and over this mountain instead. And now it's time to paint in this little unassuming roof. You never know that thing covered a massive tunnel. So here is probably just a little bit of, I think it's green. Honestly, part of me wonders if it was red now, or maybe I'm just colorblind. We'll make it green, just to keep it kind of here. A little bit of that right there, and that should be fine. And we're kind of just filling in the details as we go. So I'll put a little bit of this road down as well once you got your roof in. Maybe just mix a little bit. Looks like I got some purple and some blue on here. But just a little bit to distinguish it from the walls. Doesn't need too much. At least you can drive through it now. It's not a train track anymore. And just a touch of some little bit of indigo right there on our little emergency exit. There we go. Maybe not so much emergency exit, but a quick stop if you need it. It looks like those are kind of mixing, so I'm just going to quickly put some indigo down here too, just to get them all doing what they need to. There we go. Okay. That's looking good. Now this is going to be the really interesting part, because that's going to kind of determine a ton of it, and I sort of want to do all of this at once to get a really good, interesting, they're called the blooms, but like those kind of patterns. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put some water down right in here, and that just kind of buys us some time. Whenever you want to work wet on wet, basically if you pre-wet the paper, it just kind of, you know, it's like getting a fish wet or something after you've caught it. It just keeps it around just a little bit longer if you're trying to make decisions. Then I'm going to get a little bit of some brown, and I'm just going to add just a touch right to those edges. Ultimately, this is going to be a very dark mountain because there's not a whole lot of light underground, but this just sort of gives me a fun undercoat so that when everything else mixes, some of this will show through just a little bit, maybe. A little bit here, working right up to my little bit of a green edge, green border. The green border also helps me keep this safe, so if I want to paint in this, they're not going to connect, which is kind of great, actually. Then maybe a little bit of purple right in here, kind of making a dark color soup. A little bit right here, a little bit right there, and then we're going to come into the indigo here in just a moment. There we go, a little bit of purple right there. Okay, and now the indigo. Generally kind of the darkest color I work with. If you have Payne's Gray or Lamp Black or anything like that, that works well too. But I'm going to kind of get it nice and mixed up and a little bit watery because I want it to flow. You'll see I'm working right to those edges, but I'm also kind of letting it work its way back down. Water is very good at painting for you if you let it. So we're just going to give it a chance right now. And then I'll give a little bit of a nice crisp edge to the edge of that tunnel. Try not to make that ceiling go too low. And there we have just kind of a fun little cross section. And hopefully if everything's kind of wet and I layered stuff well, those will all kind of spread out in some really fun ways. If you're not sure, you can always add just a touch more water. Got a little bit on my brush right here, and that will really make it spread. But I never know if that helps or hurts. That's perfect. Now, before I keep on going, and this is how paintings work for me, they're constantly changing. I might come back in with my pen, and I might just add a little bit more of this cross section right here. And I might actually come back and add that nice dark layer down, just to let it go all the way through, because I kind of like the way that looks. It's kind of a fun one. That darkness, I think it could really work well down on the bottom too. So that just kind of gives me the option. Something kind of fun to do. Okay. Now, we should have the freedom to work on this mountain right now because this nice little strip of green should kind of protect us on that one. So with this, just the same. I love this stage of the painting because you've done all of the hard work. So I'm adding a little bit of yellow, but you did all of the testing and the trials, and if you're still working through some of those things, this is just a great opportunity to try it out. But it's kind of just the fun of it because you know what you're doing. A little bit of green as well. And I'll probably add a bunch of blue. I'm kind of feeling that dark royal blue just because it's so fun. Maybe just a touch more green. And then we'll blue it out. Nice dark blues. I really should come back and do an entire series on Whittier in the rain because watercolor is perfect with those watery environments. So hard to do well. All about the nuances, but there is kind of a magic of Portage and Whittier and Seward in the rain, and that could be a perfect thing to capture with watercolor, but it might take me another 10 or 15 years to like really get the nuances right. That's my favorite thing about sketching is you can be good and have a lot of fun with it, but I feel like really most artists don't peak until they're about 80 or so. So chances are you got some time, and that wet on wet stuff is that's just experience. You just got to know your watercolors really well. If you're trying to paint it outside in Whittier or Portage, gosh, yeah, those those people who live there, whether you're in the building or just like visiting or living on a boat or something, those are some tough conditions to paint in. But so worth it when it turns out well. And just a good story when it doesn't. Okay, adding just a touch of blue, trying really hard not to let him touch, but I can see it has right there, but that's okay. So just a touch of blue, and then I'll use water for all the rest. Here we go. Just let it kind of trickle down, following that water right down to the source. And I'll just push it right over the edge here. Beautiful. Maybe a bit more of that blue right around my roof just to let it stand out a little bit. But there is something kind of wild when you do come up to the road ends in this massive mountain, and there's this tiny little itty bitty structure, and it doesn't seem right at first, and then you just go through and you keep on going. But I guess when you think about it, the tunnel's almost more like a little tiny straw through the thing. It's not some big giant chasm or cavern. Beautiful. I think that's probably good on my mountain. Maybe I'll just add a touch more blue. Just some watery stuff, just for fun. Let it swirl around and step away from that. So there we go. It's kind of fun too. You can always come back in and add a little bit more. I notice my mountains don't have too much. It looks like stuff dried a lot lighter. So I might just add a touch more just so that they can actually line up a little bit. This might actually make them kind of bleed into each other, but that's okay if that happens. There we go. And now I think it's gonna be time to add a couple more of these last little details. There we go. Kind of like this right here. I love how this is moving around. If you want to, don't forget you can always come back in and add a bit more. So like indigo, I can always come back in, and while it's still wet, I can add a little bit more splotches of color, especially when you see it kind of drying a bit lighter. But I think I'm going to add just a little bit of color, feeling for wetness right down here, just because I love that look. Let's see how this looks. Oh, that is a fun one. I love these experiments. If you don't love it, you can always come back in with a piece of tissue paper or something and pause that right there. But that is gonna be really fun. And now it's just time to add a little bit more detail to these cars. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit of a shadow underneath these cars. It seems small, but it kind of makes a big difference. Check this out. A little bit of indigo or whatever I got here. Just a tiny bit of a shadow. Same with this one right here. But you want to add this before you add in the car, because otherwise it's really hard to work around those wheels. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of some of this indigo right under our roof. Just right in there, just kind of giving it some depth. Cross sections are always funny because it's like, where does the cross section begin and the, what you can't see from the outside. So I'm just going to fill in this full thing right there. And then just making sure maybe there's just a touch extra indigo right at the edge. Just like that. And finally, I think I'm going to add just a little bit more of this darkness. I think I'm actually going to have all of this be dark. I can't quite decide. I'll start by at least this bush right here that I kind of extended in. Just a little bit right there. The indecision is real. But that's always how it is with a good painting. If you make something you like and you don't have a little bit of indecision or questioning what should be next, did you even do it well? So I'll have a little bit there, and then maybe a touch. Maybe I will hold off. Maybe I'll just put a touch more. A little bit of that indigo, kind of right here-ish, where we've got that little strut. There we go. That's feeling great. Kind of fun to see that from the outside, isn't it? Maybe a little bit more darkness, but okay. All we've got to do now is add just a little bit of color to those vehicles, if you have any. If you have a train, it can get a little bit more complex, but good on you for trying it. I'll just add maybe a touch of red, making sure it's not too watery, because I really don't want to have to go in there and mop it up if it connects with its own shadow. Just a little bit of red right here. Red truck. Like I said, not the best at drawing cars, but it's enough, you know? Oh, that is a bright red truck. Watercolor will always dry lighter, but you can also come back in with a little bit of just water and kind of mop that up like there. And then maybe this car inside will have kind of maybe a nice light blue beetle. That always sounds about right. But people will bring their trailers, their boats, all kinds of vehicles pass through this tunnel. It's pretty wild. And there we have it. Voila! Just a little fun sketch of Whittier going back through the tunnel after coming out and painting all of this wild landscape. But this has been a super fun one. If you haven't already, there are several more of these, including Portage, if you want to head up and see what's over top of that trail. It can be really fun, but whether you live in Alaska or not, it is one of the most amazing spots on Earth. And then go back a few years, the history behind it is just so cool. It's a great work and can't wait to travel through these landscapes with you soon.
breaking